Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where I teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. I am very, very excited today to introduce to you a nurse, a gentleman, and Mike, I dare call you a friend. I hope that's okay.
That is perfect with me, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And I guess I can give you an introduction, or would you like to give everyone the background on how we met? Because we've been acquainted now for, over a decade, I believe.
Yeah, so we first met when I was at the University of Kansas Hospital, and you came to the hospital there and did a presentation, and we just headed off and have been connected ever since. And thanks to social media that we can continue to follow each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know that there's a lot of pitfalls to social media, but it certainly helps me keep up with friends like yourself that I live across the country from. And so as I said, you're a nurse, but what is your current position? And tell us a little about who you are currently before we get into background and what has led you to this passion of nursing in your life.
Yeah, so I'm an emergency nurse. So I actually currently now work for Philips as a healthcare consultant. So I go into hospitals and help them out doing interim leadership work, doing process improvement. And so it really gives me the opportunities to go into facilities that are having some sort of issues or struggles and be able to help them out currently. So.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that you're doing that. You've got years of experience in nursing, so you've had lots of times to witness what works and what doesn't, and to help organizations run better. So take us back to the beginning. Did you always want to be a nurse?
Actually, no. Actually, my first career path was actually going to go in law enforcement. So. As a kid, my dream was actually to be an FBI agent, is really kind of what I wanted to do. And so my first undergrad degree is actually in criminal justice. I actually worked for a sheriff's department and did internships with the police department, worked security work, and then kind of, things happened, and it led me into nursing. My first kind of experience with healthcare really was when I was 16. I actually did a ride-along with an ambulance service in Kansas City. One of the Boy Scouts dads that I was in the Boy Scouts with, he worked on the ambulance and said, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, sure, so I did the ride along, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun. So I got my EMT when I was 18, and so, yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that you were an EMT before you became a nurse, and also before you had a criminology degree, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I worked, and the interesting fact is that you can get your EMT license when you're 18. However, in the state, I couldn't work on the ambulance until I was 21 due to their insurance requirements. And so during that time, I just volunteered with the American Red Cross and did a bunch of first aid events with them and help respond to local disasters, essentially, in the area.
So one of the reasons that I love talking to nurses is because I feel like nurses have such a core of service, right? We get this one opportunity in our life to help the lives of others and serve them. And you seem to have that before you were a nurse too, obviously. So how did that get instilled in you?
Yeah, I don't really know. I kind of reflect back on my childhood. I mean, I was involved in the Boy Scouts, and so I think with Boy Scouts, they really teach you, how to pay it forward and to provide community service and to help others out. And so, I mean, I was involved in Scouts really actively until I was about 21 years of age. So it's something there just to kind of hit home that I really want to give back to my communities and always help other people out. So.
Glad to hear it. And as a former scout, I'm also always excited to hear when people have had great experiences with the scouting programs. So you started into with your EMT. Then you decided to go to nursing school after your bachelor's. And did you immediately have an interest in emergency nursing?
Yeah. So I worked on the ambulance for about 10 years prior to going back to nursing school, and so obviously, when I decided to make the plunge into nursing, I thought, okay, as a nurse, I'm going to get better pay, better hours, not have to work outside like I did as an EMT, right? So,
Yeah.
so I always knew though, like I love that adrenaline, I love that kind of rush, and so what kind of area did I see myself in? And I was always drawn to the emergency department right off the bat. Obviously, in nursing school, you have clinical shifts, and so you rotate through different areas. And the only areas that really spoke to me really was the emergency department. So I was fortunate enough when I graduated in 2004 that I landed a job in the emergency department, and I've been here ever since.
And you landed a job in a level 1 trauma center, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. At University of Kansas Hospital. So it's a level 1 trauma center, burn center, cardiac center. So we did everything there.
Do you remember your first day on the job?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So thankfully, during my senior practicum, I landed there in the emergency department as a senior student. So I got to work with them as a student still, so it helped that transition. And then when I got hired in as staff, obviously it's a different thing. It's like, okay, you're not a student anymore, you're the actual nurse. So yeah, I still can kind of recall back to that first time that I walked in as a nurse, like, oh my God, this is it.
I can imagine that so many people just think, "Gosh, just please don't let me kill anybody on the job. Just please don't let anything be my fault."
Exactly. Well, I was like, okay, I mean, thankfully I knew who my preceptor was going to be, and since we worked together when I was a student, I was like, okay, at least I know he has my back, right? And so, and especially in the emergency department, it's all about a teamwork and dynamics. You're not alone, and it's knowing that you have each other's back and that you're always there for each other.
Yeah, there's a dynamic that it seems like happens in the ED that you may not have on a med surg floor within a hospital of bonding and camaraderie and almost tribal,
Exactly.
almost tribal, the relationships in the ED. I must admit I'm a little envious of that. I don't think that everyone who works in any kind of job has that environment where you have somebody's back, and as you said, you're there for each other.
Yeah, and I think it's important, especially with everything that we face in the emergency department. We see the worst of the worst, right? And we never know what's going to happen. And knowing that it's okay to be able to lean on each other and say, hey, I'm not doing okay, with whatever. And so to have that culture of safety that you can build upon each other and rely on each other is just extremely important.
So that always brings about the question then, as you know, I share my story of being a patient in the emergency department and the story of Jenny when she held my hand and said, I'm here. And I always relay how that cornerstone of compassion and caregiving is presence. So could you share with us a time that somebody has been there for you or that you have been there for somebody else, whether this is in nursing or outside of nursing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that I always stress to my teams that I lead is letting them know that, especially in the emergency department, these are the things that we face every single day. We see the tragedies, we see the injuries, but for the patient, that's their first time encounter normally with us, right? They don't know what's going on. We're speaking different lingo to them. Multiple things are going on. They have no idea what's going on. So it's really making sure that you're present with that patient and that you can connect with them. I mean, I have several cases that I can remember being present there with my patient and trying to guide them and get them through whatever's going on. So one I remember was a case is a burn case that we had. The mom and daughter was flown into us. And the way that our trauma bays were set up actually at the time was it was a bay, so there was only a curtain really between the two sides of the room. And the daughter wasn't doing well, and I was actually taking care of the mom on the other side. Of course, mom could hear what was going on the other side, and unfortunately the daughter was coding, so her heart wasn't beating, and she could hear the frantic and everything and the chaos essentially that was going on the other side. And so here I'm trying to care for the mom, for her, physical wounds that she faced, but also her emotional wounds, and I can't tell her that it's going to be okay, right? Because like I don't know what the outcome is going to be. Even if her daughter does survive, like I don't know what that means, right? I can say that, hey, we will get through this, and be present there with her in that moment. And I think that's always the hardest, the thing, and just like how you experienced with your nurse, that says, hey, I'm here, She didn't say it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right, it's, hey, I'm here. You have somebody here right now with you.
Do you remember what the outcome of that scenario was?
Yeah, unfortunately, the daughter did pass away, and we were able to actually get the mom over to kind of put her bed up to her daughter's bed, to hold her hand, but yeah, unfortunately, the outcome definitely wasn't, the best, by any means, but and it's one of those things that, as I reflect back still today, many years later, I mean, it still, pulls at those heartstrings knowing, that mom was there and how to say goodbye to her daughter.
What a difficult story. What a difficult story. I often bring up about how important families are in the caregiving process and the whole circle of care. But boy, what an interesting time when you have a parent who is also a patient.
Right.
A parent who is also a patient. So how do nurses, and how do you specifically, how do you go home after a shift and shake that off? How do you go home after a shift and witnessing something extremely tragic, and then go home and, cook dinner for the family, play with the kids, help with homework? What's your process?
Yeah, and I think, that's is always a hard thing, especially in the emergency department. I always kind of say that we have this bipolar approach, and because I can go from that scene of that incident that's happened, and then I have to go and take care of my next patient and essentially act like nothing's going on, right? So I have to be able to flip a switch in me and be like, oh, I'm sorry, you wanted a warm blanket, I'm sorry I wasn't, here with you right away, that you had to wait, right? And be able to really flip that switch and give them the care that they want and desire, as well. And I think the same thing, though, then when I go home, right, it's like I have to be able to flip that switch and be present for my family and realize that, hey, this is where I'm at now. And so for me, it's that drive home, honestly, that decompresses me, that I can reflect back kind of on whatever was going on for the day events, and try to put that kind of behind me, So I used to say that I would go work out in the after work, but actually now I actually kind of flip that around. I actually work out before work, so I can't even say I'm working out, to decompress. But it's really kind of finding out, for each person has to find out their own routine of what works best for them. So.
I love that you said that, you use the car to decompress after work. And I'm a big fan of using the car, right? But if you've got that time to transition between work and home life, entrepreneurs like me, if I come home from work, it means that I came out of my office. Right. It's a little different than having a 30-minute drive home to be able to crank up some music or pray or meditate or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So let me ask you a couple of questions about your passions with nursing. I know that you are very involved with Emergency Nurses Association, and I love whenever I come across nurses who are involved with their professional associations. Thank you for being such an advocate for professionalism in nursing too. Tell me about your roles through the ENA and other organizations that also help your professional role.
Yeah, so I landed my first ER job in 2004, and at the time, actually, I joined ENA, so the Emergency Nurses Association. So honestly, it would look good on my resume. All transparency. It's why I joined. Because I thought, if I'm a member, then hopefully this will help get my foot in the door to land my job. As I said, it worked out. So since I got the job, and then in 2012, I actually was invited to go to one of our state meetings in Kansas at the time. And so I went to the state meeting, and I was like, oh, I don't know. This seemed like not a lot of action, really. It was a lot of talk and a lot of policies and things that they were talking about. And I was like, this isn't really for me. And then my preceptor again dragged me to another meeting. Well, essentially the joke was like, I probably got up to go to the bathroom at some point, and then all of a sudden I was voted in a position, right? So,
right.
And so it was kind of how it was. And so actually at the time I was actually also doing my internship, or I needed to find an internship for my master's program because I was doing my master's in organizational leadership in healthcare. And so the challenge was that they wanted you to do something outside of your own institution, so it couldn't be at the same place that you work, and ideally at a bigger place to a bigger scale than what you normally would experience. Well, I was at the largest healthcare system in Kansas City, so where was I going to go? And so I actually reached out to a member of the board of directors at ENA at the time to find out if there was something that I could do within ENA. And kind of fast forward, luckily enough, I got matched with ENA. I was able to do an internship at the national level, and that kind of helped start the ball rolling and get my involvement within ENA. I've served on several different committees, and then I was voted on the board of directors, and then progressed up through the board of directors as a secretary-treasurer, and then in 2020, I was the president of ENA, which, let me tell you, leading an association of emergency nurses through a pandemic was definitely a challenge because also at the same time I had my own emergency department that I was trying to get through the pandemic as well. So, and now I just transitioned off of the actual ENA board of directors, and now I'm moving over to our foundation. And so I'm currently the vice chair of our foundation and will be the chair next year.
And so let's just recap that. In 2020, the year of the nurse, the year of the beginning of the pandemic, you were the president of the Emergency Nurses Association.
Yes. And also, it was our 50th anniversary year for ENA as well. So it was supposed to be this big global year of celebration, right? Our 50th anniversary of a year and the year of the nurse. And what did we get? We got a pandemic.
Yeah. It's a kick in the pants, right? For sure. So there's a few things that you brought up here. I love your master's in organizational leadership, you said?
Correct. Yep.
So there's so many definitions of leadership. Do you have a favorite definition of leadership?
I don't. When people ask me, especially one of those questions that as you're interviewing, people will always ask you, what's your leadership style, right? And I said, well, I don't have a leadership style. I take a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and a little bit of this, right? Because it's from every concept that you should take a little bit of and adhere to what makes you as a person, as an individual, right? So, yes, I have aspects of each one of these, and this is who I am as a person. So there's not a single definition. There's not a single label for that. This is who I am.
What's the most difficult thing about leading a team of an entire emergency department? However, how many people is that for those who are not in the know?
Yeah, so it all depends on the size of the emergency department that you operate. So previously, when I was last at for 5 years, I had a staff of about 100, 120, and currently where I'm at right now, I have a team of about 200 staff.
200.
Yeah. And so obviously a 24/7 operation, it makes it hard because there's only one of me, right? I can't work 24 hours a day, but one of the things that it's extremely important is to make sure that that you're present for your staff so they have a chance to connect with you and get to know you on a personal level, right? It's that human connection that we all want and desire, and they have to know that I'm actually a human as well, and I need them to know that I want them to be known as a person and not just as another number.
And that's what we all want, right?
Right.
That's what personalism is that the way that we treat individuals as individuals, not as the patient in room 105 or the appendectomy in room 214, but we're all individuals, we're all humans with different ways of interacting in the world.
Exactly.
Do you think that leadership of a group of nurses might be significantly different than leading a group of other healthcare professionals, or are the concepts of leadership still the same?
For me, I think the concepts of leaderships are the same, right? I think there's obviously nuances to any areas that you would lead, right? If it's a nurse in the emergency department, if it's nurses in the ICU, if it's respiratory therapist I'm leading, or radiology technicians, or even our environmental services, right? The concepts of leadership really are the same, and it's about, the job is different, right? The job itself is different, but the overall concepts of how to be a leader and how to lead with grace and humility, right? It's all the same.
Yeah. I sometimes say that leadership, it's not rocket surgery. It's just being human.
Exactly.
And being open to how different we all are as individuals, and that interaction together, being able to navigate that and help people become the best they can be. It's not rocket surgery, but it does take being very, very intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the key word, right? It's intentional, right? Like you have to be mindful and intentional of that, right? It takes work. It's not like you can just be, thrown into a position and be like, hey, you're a leader, right? I mean, without any work to it, on your part, then you're not going to be a successful leader. I mean, yes, you can be a leader, but you're not going to be very successful and not get the buy-in from your staff that you need.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you're getting to use that leadership in both your roles in your regular job and then also in the association and now on the foundation. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Awesome. Tell us about the foundation that you're now involved with.
Yeah, so the Emergency Nursing Association, so our foundation arm is all about raising funds and paying it forward, essentially, right? So we help nurses get their degrees. So if they have their associates, they want their bachelor's or their master's or their doctor's. And we also have scholarships for those that are interested in becoming a nurse, so that are just starting that journey into nursing as well. The other thing that we also do is we pay for research. So we help do research grants for people that are studying something related to the emergency department setting, and anything that we can be doing better and outcomes-wise, that's what we want to be able to make sure that we're supporting that research. And then kind of our third arm for that really is about our philanthropic activities and how do we give back to our communities as well.
And how do you do that?
Well, so that is the $1 million question that we're trying to navigate. Kind of really like what does that look like these days, and giving back to our communities and doing outreach, right? So does that mean like when we go to a conference that we have some sort of community service event that we're organizing, spearheading for that local community to be able to pay it forward to that community to say, hey, this is a group of emergency nurses that are here. We care for you every single day in your community because emergency departments, we are the safety net of our healthcare system. But we want to do something beyond that, right? We want to come to your community. Do we want to do a food drive? Do we want to do some sort of like Habitat for Humanity? Whatever the case may be, right? Like we want to be able to help make a difference in that local community where we're at.
And that just, to me, is the heart of a nurse. You're already making the commitment to helping the community in your home environment, in the emergency department, in your hometown. And then you're also going to conferences and conventions around the country and continuing to do community service, servant leadership at that site. It's just such a nurse thing to do. I love to hear that. Such a nurse thing.
Exactly, right? And that's what we love doing, right? As a nurse, like we love to be able to give back and to help others. And so that's just who we are.
So here we are now at this point in time, roughly 2 years into the pandemic. And everybody is tired. Everybody is tired. We know that the cases of violence that are being brought into the emergency departments have increased significantly. We know that nurses are burnt out. Healthcare professionals are burnt out so much more than a couple of years ago. What do you think that, I guess I'm specifically talking about hospital leadership here and tapping into your experience there. What can leadership do for nurses who are at the bedside, or I don't really love to use war metaphors, but who are on the front line? What can leadership do to help nurses feel supported and appreciated during this time?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is, first off, is knowing that they recognize that there's a problem and that it's not okay, right? So one of the things that you'll hear from people all the time as a nurse is like, oh, well, that happened to me, but that's just part of the job, right? Like getting hit, getting kicked, getting cursed at, that's just part of the job. Well, no, it's not. It's not part of the job, right? We wouldn't allow anybody else, the food worker that's working at McDonald's, say, we wouldn't allow them to be treated that same way, right? So why would we want to be treated here in the healthcare setting the same way, right? It's not acceptable. And so really what has to change is that we have to have administration that says, hey, I understand that this happens, but what we need to know is, when does it happen? Because, we need to see how prevalent it is in our institution, and then figure out ways that we can mitigate those from happening. Unfortunately, we do know that it will probably happen, but it's not okay for that to happen, right? And so we need to have policies and procedures in place to protect our healthcare workers, right? So is it mandatory reporting for all those events that have happened? Is it pressing charges on the person that actually assaulted you? And if you, as a nurse, I have the right to be able to press a charge, and I need to have my institution support me if I want to press charges on the person that assaulted me.
Yeah, the occupational hazards that go along with the job are certainly there, but we also have to, it's just part of Maslow's hierarchy, mm-hmm. right? We have to feel safe right. in our personhood.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and I hope that any folks that are in leadership take note of the experience here that Mike is talking about. Mike, I've got just a few minutes left, so can I hit you with a couple of rapid fire questions?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So let's say that you are stranded on a desert island, and yet on that desert island, you can keep one piece of art with you. One piece of art. And whether that's a book, a painting, a sculpture, a Netflix series, what type of art, and what's the piece of art that you would most like to have if you were stranded?
Oh, man. So early in the morning to make my brain work this hard, Marcus. I am on the West Coast time here, so no coffee in place. Let's see, what would I want? I'd probably want like a picture like of my family with like some sort of different scenery in the background off of them, right? So like if I'm on an island, like probably like of mountains behind them or something. Right, so then that way it gives me a different viewpoint, and then it shows me, like, hey, there's my loved ones that are there, as well. So
that's excellent. That's an excellent answer. Second question for you: do you, if you could spend a day in the life of any fictional character, who would you want to live as for one day?
Oh my gosh. Fictional character. Man, I don't know. That's a hard one.
That's a hard one. Any character from a movie or a book that you especially love or admire?
Well, like I would joke because as a kid, right? Like I love the movie E.T. Right? So it was like Elliot, who was, E.T.'s friend there, like, I'm like, oh, that would have been so cool, to to be friends with ET, right? Like an alien,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, that'd be kind of cool. So,
That's a great.
like, I don't know. I guess, I mean, that would have to, the kid at heart, that's what I'd have to say.
Kid at heart. Excellent. Excellent. And then lastly, if you opened up your wallet or your PayPal app or whatever your currency of choice is, and you found that $100 had magically appeared in your account, but you have to spend this $100, where would you spend it?
Well, it depends on if my boys are with me or not. Right? Do they know all of a sudden?
Go to kids. Yes,
do all
of
of a
course.
sudden they know that I have $100 to spend? Because otherwise, if so, then we're going to buy toys
GameStop.
for them, right? So,
Yeah.
Exactly, GameStop or so. But if it was just for me, I don't know. I mean, like I say, I pay it forward quite a bit, so I probably actually just take it and like I would buy some random gift cards and hand them out to random people just as another act of kindness.
And that again is such an example of a nurse. So thank you for that. And Mike, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Love what you do, love the person that you are, and thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom with the Compassion and Courage community.
Well, thank you, Marcus. It's always great to interact with you, my friend, and it's just remembering that we're all in this together, right? Like we will get through this, and so it's just having grace and compassion with each other, but we will get through this all together.
Again, as a nurse, speaking about grace and compassion, it's a pleasure for me and an honor to know you. Thank you so much, Mike, for being with me today. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. Please rate and review, subscribe, share, all that fun media stuff. And remember that this is the podcast where I teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. We'll see you all in the next episode.